Starseed Day!
Yay!
Happy Starseed Day!
Hello and welcome. This is day 30. No, 32. I just lost time there for a second. Day 32. We only have 2 more of these. And I am Jelelle Awen, and today is Inner Child and Starseed and Inner Teenager Day. And it's interesting because this has been on my list to talk about from the very beginning, and it's kind of been getting put aside as other things come up. Certainly we've had two supermoons this month, plus the 111 portal. So those things needed to be responded to. And then just guesting, having my beloveds come on here and talk with you, and then just all the other things we've covered. So on our second to last day, it feels really fitting to go into and talk about these energies that are so precious inside of us and so often forgotten, suppressed, abandoned, overly protected, just related to by other parts of us in such a way that they usually don't get to express very much, even as they can be a very dominant aspect of our personality, which is what I'll talk about. And I think I'll start with what I have found, especially in the last year, is that predominantly it seems our energy we lead with often the part of us called the inner teenager. And this inner teenager energy is sort of capped at a certain level of emotional maturity. Our teenagehood is often so intense, and we're trying to shuffle through our passions and our desires and often we're having huge soul awakenings too, where the soul is coming into the body, and it's really time to feel what we're here and why we're here and what we want to do. This is also the time, I believe, where our starseed is activated during our teenagehood. So we really are emphasizing connecting with the inner teenager in our soulful heart process now. In order to get to the teenager, we start with the protector, which I've talked about a lot in this series. And the protector is really, you could feel it as the guard at the door of the teenager's bedroom. Every teenager I've met inner teenager has had a special relationship with their bedroom. It's, even if they share it with a sibling, it's still kind of the sanctuary. It's their sovereign space. And so often the teenager energy is in their bedroom. And so we're unique in Soulful Heart in that we start with the protector. We begin there to get negotiation to connect with the teenager and eventually the inner child. And we hold this as a sacred unfolding process. I believe, there's offerings out there that go right to the inner child energies. I have question about that. I've been doing this parts work for a long time. And what I feel about that is that actually what's coming up, probably a lot of shame and hurt and sadness, those are some frequencies of the inner child, but they're not really the essence necessarily. They're probably more of what I would call an off-gassing energy. So you're not really getting to the core of the inner child. I don't feel that you can get to the core of the inner child without negotiation with the protector and relaxation of the inner teenager. I also feel that it seems pretty critical too that you have a space holder that can hold a safe space for these inner child energies to come out that has also worked with their inner child in the same way. The inner child is often so caught up in hurt and shame and so shy and self-conscious in its wounded frequency, that it doesn't really want to come out. And so if you're doing a guided meditation, if you're doing a weekend retreat to connect to your inner child, you may be getting something. I'm not saying you're not. It's just the true frequency of it is often hidden, and it's highly protected and guarded by the protector. So it's in this negotiation with the protector, who actually, so often I see this, relates to you as a teenager. Doesn't really see you as an adult, no matter how old you are. And in relating to you as a teenager is very overly protective and stressful and burdened and annoyed. I was just meeting with someone yesterday, and her protector she said, he's side-eyeing me. Like, that's the perfect description. And it was clear that he was seeing her as a teenager, not as a grown woman. So connecting with the teenager leads to access to the inner child eventually. And it's this patience with process that can be hard for people sometimes. To trust that the layers will unfold, they will move, they will dissolve, the frequencies will go from wounded, like I described, into more health. It's having the patience to be with that process, to hold space for that process. That all of this frequency shifting, this woundedness, you could say, didn't happen overnight. It happened in layers. And there's this life layers, and then there's other timeline layers that are also contributing to this. So looking for a quick fix or something that's immediately going to clear it is often a part, maybe even the protector, that's just so burdened and so tired and wants relief. And yet the deeper layers don't actually get touched or moved. And I want to say too, I've been meeting with a lot of people, especially lately, who have done years and years of therapy and other modalities, and they're kind of like, why hasn't more of this healed? Why do I still feel this wounded child inside of me? I still have a lot of energy and pain and sadness around what I experienced as a child and what I experienced as a teenager. And I really feel that's connected to not being able to go into the actual emotive grounds where these frequencies are. So I often say the emotional body is like a river. So you can walk along the riverbank and talk about it for a really long time, and your protector will let you do that, and they will walk along beside you and talk about the river. Where they get more uncomfortable is actually diving into it, going into those waters of your emotional body to feel it again, to surrogate it, to love it, and to move it. And it takes negotiation with them in order to dive in. And when you've got them on your side, this part of you, your protector, knows more about what's going on in both this life at expressions of parts and metasoul, eventually. All the timelines of your soul it knows about too, than any outside person could ever know. So you think about it that way, you are befriending the energy that has the keys to all the doors. And isn't that worth it? Isn't it worth it to spend that time to get to know your protector, to gain trust with it, for it to feel, well, you're not a fragile teenager that's going to not be able to handle this emotional body dive and all that's in there. You're growing and you're maturing, and maybe you can even help me, which is what starts shifting. So in gaining the trust of the protector, they start telling you about the teenager. and they start telling you about the child, inner child too. And the teenager will start telling you about the inner child. So you're negotiating it that way. So as you hear about, for example, your inner child, and they tell you about, oh, she's so sad, she's under her bed, or she's in a closet and she doesn't want to come out, and she really would love to go play, but she can't. And you're feeling that, and wow, I so feel that. I feel why she's in the closet, and I wonder if it's time for her to come out yet. And the parts, teenager protector, may tell you, no, it's not quite time yet. I don't quite trust you yet, but maybe someday. So you hang out, and you get to know the parts that will let you connect with them with patience and curiosity, because it really gets fascinating pretty quickly. Everything you think you know about yourself, and even if you've done years of therapy, connecting with parts seems, I say seems because I can't know, but it seems to bring in a whole nother access point and almost immediately reveal things that you had no idea about or had forgotten. And that's the beauty of it to me. So in this negotiation with the protector and the feeling of the teenager, you eventually get to the inner child, and feeling the inner child and being with them, they start to transmute their energy. This was my experience. So when I was connecting with inner child energies in myself initially, it was really about hurt. There's a lot of hurt. And there was a lot of reason for that hurt. And if you think about it this way, so the inner child, I'll just use me as an example. My inner child had a lot of hurt. And I had a protector that had a lot of anxiety about my inner child getting hurt again. And my inner teenager had a ton of hurt too. And depression. The depression usually actually is about soul expression. My inner teenager's depression had many layers to it. But the protector has anxiety because it doesn't want the inner child or teenager to get hurt again. And yet it actually doesn't know how to choose anything else because there's an inherent immaturity inside that can't choose a mature situation, for example, in relationships. So then there's yet another recapitulation of the pain and hurt, and it doesn't know what to do, the protector. So sometimes it just shuts everything down, and that's when you go maybe into a protracted isolation or lone wolf phase, or it stays safe. Long-term marriage that maybe isn't very passionate or has any spiritual grounds, but it's safe and it's known. So for now, the inner child and teenager are okay. They're not thriving. They're not passionately engaging in life, but they're okay. They're maintaining. So when you start connecting through the process with your protector, you feel these things, like I said, rather quickly. You start unraveling this. And then eventually when you do connect with your inner child, what I found was that it quickly started I wouldn't say quickly, this was over years, but it transmuted into magic and wonder and joy and innocence and all of these frequencies that we have innate inside of us that are in us as children, although I think they get covered over very quickly compared to how potent they actually are. And eventually this inner child transmutes to the starseed. So this has been the last couple of years where this has become clearer to me because I've seen it in myself and my beloveds here. And the starseed child, we've been talking about in our videos about Andy. Here's Andy. And we'll take the hat off because we're talking less formally today. But this energy, this is not just a stuffy of Raphael's. This actually holds the energy of Raphael's starseed. So Raphael's starseed has this frequency of charisma and innocence and joy and magic. And Raphael will put them in his pocket when we go out, or we'll be at Starbucks and he'll set them on the table. And inevitably he draws people's comments and questions, not just little kids, but adults. It's like their inner child, their starseed goes, "What's that?" And lights up. Like, it's this really neat thing to see this, to just see how Raphael's permission to have this energy come out. He's funny too. To have this energy come out and what it brings out in other people. And that's the thing with the starseed. The main wounding for the inner child, this is how we differentiated in the process, happened in this life. So their main wounding is around parental experiences, caregiver experiences, peers, friends, that kind of thing. If there was abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, all those frequencies in childhood of this life. The starseed holds, their wounded frequencies are around abduction and star family abandonment. So this is how we differentiate this. And I feel, and certainly in myself, my starseed's name is Aurora. And I've had that name for a long time. And I thought she was my inner child. I just called her my inner child. But she didn't feel like my inner child. She felt different. I always felt she was almost more, she was of the stars somehow. I mean, Aurora. But I didn't get she was my starseed child self. I know people have a different meaning for starseed, but we're using it this way. I didn't realize she was my starseed child until not that long ago. But it was really Aurora who helped me digest my abduction experiences with star beings, which were actually visits that started when I was about 8. One of my doorways in, there's always little doorways, little clues, puzzle pieces, breadcrumbs, if you will, that you can start putting together if you begin to ask the right questions, if you could begin to be curious instead of frustrated, compassionate with yourself instead of judging yourself, then all of a sudden you become your own love detective. And one of my breadcrumbs was the movie E.T., which I realized later during the summer of one of my first abductions when I was staying with my grandmother in Kansas. And I had a visceral memory of flying over a cornfield. And corn obviously didn't grow in Colorado where I grew up, but it did in Kansas. So in E.T., I just lost it. Just cried and cried and cried. Other people in the audience were laughing, and there were some funny scenes, but when E.T. is going to die, cried and cried. When Elliot says, "Take me with you," cried. And what I realized later was that it was because I wanted to go back. I wanted to be with my star family. Even though to my inner child it was very scary to be on the ships and to be going through the examinations and some of the other things. To my starseed, Aurora, it was home. Frequency was way more comfortable. And so a few years ago, when I was living on a remote ranch here in Mexico, I did some meditation journeys with Aurora to go back to the ships to meet Bink, my Arcturian metasoul aspect, and to reconnect with, yes, there was terror. The main terror for the inner child is just the lack of personal will and the feeling like it's being done against our will and the feeling like we don't have any say. For our starseed, it's about being abandoned again because we start remembering where we're from and our origins, and then we get left here in 3D. And what I remembered recently, this was very magical for me and very powerful movement, was that, so I had these, I don't call them abductions, I call them visitations. Because on a higher self level, on a star family level, we choose them. They're actually more like check-ins. We choose the implants. I know this is going to be controversial to some people, but this is what it feels like to me. Because I like to feel that we choose, and everything is offered in love. So rather than entities attacking us or implants being put in against our will, that whole frequency just feels like it perpetuates this against energy. So for me, many of my metasoul aspects were collaborating. My star family was collaborating. My higher self was collaborating. And what I chose was to have many visits between the ages of 8 and 17. And then I also chose, what I remembered recently, was to be an ambassador. As a teenager, I would help the other kids they felt like they were being abducted, and so they were very scared and terrified, and I would show up, a human teenager, and reassure them, it's okay, you actually chose this. This is your star family, you just don't remember. And that would do something. That would soothe them. Because the star beings were actually trying to calm the whole experience down and have it not be so traumatic for us. But they just didn't know how. It's not that they're unfeeling. Some of them are. Some of them feel more like robots, maybe the little grays, more like robots. It's that they don't understand human emotion. They're really drawn to it and they find it fascinating, but they don't understand it. So this was my ambassadorship as a teenager. And then at some point I was wiped. The memory of that was wiped and kind of plopped back in my life, I think at about 17, so that I could choose. My higher self could then choose when it was time for me to remember. That was very painful for me as a teenager. That is actually what put me into a deep depression. I thought it was a relationship with a boy that didn't work out. I thought it was difficulties with my parents, relating with them, which had always been true. Those were aspects of it for my 3D teenager. But we could say for my starseed, which isn't just a child, I think it spans. For my starseed, it was really about I no longer had any purpose here. I had all this purpose on the ships, right? But in walking around Earth life, I was just a 17-year-old with depression and bad skin and overweight. I wasn't seen. And that's one of the biggest woundings for teenagers. In other cultures and other timelines, your teenage time is a time where you undergo initiation, where you're seen for what your soul gifts are and they're watered. You're seen for your bigness actually as a baby. Definitely in the higher frequencies I've felt of star family, there's a recognition of what a soul is there to do, and they're initiated and trained and supported. In our 3D culture, teenagers are often a burden. Oh, the difficult teens. Oh, how do I get through this? Rather than held as this magical time of purpose and potential. So for me, and I remembered this was maybe a month ago, and I've been doing this for a lot of years, so it was interesting. I think everything's being sped up, by the way. I think my process was as slow as it was, also because I was way showing, I was figuring it out as I went. And so I believe now these things are happening much faster, these realizations. And the whole contact piece with star beings and star family is speeding up and accelerating, and is an aspect of collective disclosure as well. So in remembering this, Jill is my teenager. That was my birth name, the name I went by as a teenager. Jill was just overcome with pain. And it wasn't just Jill, it was Aurora too, my starseed. They both were. And I just kind of, after all these years, I just sort of held space for this memory of being this ambassador on on the ships and then being nothing. And I felt, these parts felt suicidal because of that. They felt like, I might as well leave. And during this time of feeling so suicidal when I was 17, after I got wiped, my higher self's choice to be white, I heard voices, guidance, saying to me, you're really young, and you have so much to do here, and you're really needed. And that was really hard to understand when I looked out at my 3D life as a teenager, that there was any purpose for me being here in another way. But that message went in and it landed, and I didn't hurt myself, and obviously didn't kill myself, and really felt, wow, this is temporary. This really is temporary. Like, it hurts bad, but somehow this is going to come back around. And now, however many years later, 30 years later, what it's coming back around to is being this galactic ambassador. So the ambassadorship, as I like to say, has to start from inside. This was my ambassadorship to my teenager and my star seed, to just hold them in the pain of this memory. It also empowered them to feel, wow, I've been at this for a while, and this is part of my purpose here, is now, in Soulful Heart work, is to help others who have this integration of abduction experiences, moving into feeling it as visitations, moving into feeling the star seed and what it needs and wants, so that it transmutes into an Andy energy. Fun, playful, exploratory, magical. And these energies, people remark on our energies as, Raphael and I in particular, as being quite innocent or pure. And this comes from this work with the teenager, the inner child, and the inner star seed. They all hold seeds of purity and innocence. And without that work, starting with that protective layer and the punisher and control, actually what you're feeling is this unhealed wounding. So it's suppressing these frequencies of innocence. It's safe inside of my being to be innocent. That doesn't mean that I don't have self-protection, and I've been through a lot, and I've seen a lot. So, and my discernment is quite strong, my intuition. These things come from, as I've talked about, working with your inner punisher. So when the punisher isn't judging everything and you and all the parts, it can move into this clear intuition, focus, and discernment. So that's maybe one of the main points of this video today, is how these parts, their energy moves and shifts, and it is what allows for higher frequency consciousnesses to happen. So we have the 3D inner child that has some of the wounded expressions I've been talking about, that moves into more of the 4D star seed. The 4D star seed, what I've gotten, becomes the energy that powers our Merkabah, our light body vehicles, and eventually just sort of becomes this childlike wonder, this innocence and purity that isn't a part at all. It's just part of the whole. So there's that for you to digest, and I'll put a couple links too in the description for you to read more about this, and just see what starts bubbling up for you and what resonates. So I had two friends here today. I think Rocco the dragon is Kalena's starseed's dragon, and then I had my monkey I've had for years, that's Aurora's. So we're all saying bye for now. See you tomorrow.